Our Estuary, sponsored by the Humber Nature Partnership and BP Chemicals.
On today's show, I'll be taking a Humber boat trip with Harbour Master Phil Cowing, who'll be talking about dredging, which is more exciting than it sounds. And I'll be meeting Graham Bonus, the first person in recorded history to have walked across the River Humber. Well, through it anyway. But first, over to James in Barrow.
Mention the Humber to most people and there are two things that come to mind. The impressive Humber suspension bridge and this stuff, mud. Mud is an essential component of our rivers and estuaries, and it consists of the fine-grained sediments that are deposited by the flow of water. Sand is also important and is found further out in the estuary. The constant movement and deposition of these sediments means that the navigable channels of the Humber change constantly. This is a challenge for the many ships and boats which use the Humber. The need for deep water means that dredging is often necessary to keep the channels open and usable. But all this mud is home to lots of tiny animals which provide the estuary with a rich food resource which attracts birds from far afield. I'm off to meet Anne Goodall, a local ecologist who's going to tell us a bit more about what attracts the birds to the Humber estuary. I'm here with Anne Goodall, who is an independent ecologist from Ecological Services in Lincoln, and Anne is going to be talking to us about why the Humber attracts birds from so far afield. So Anne, welcome, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about why the Humber is such a special place for birds.
You're right. Two reasons really. The first is that although there are not many birds here at the moment because it's midsummer, they're all up in the Arctic on their breeding grounds, but starting towards the end of next month, tens of millions of wading birds and wildfowl are going to start pouring south, and they're going to come from the Canadian Arctic right across through Greenland, Iceland, all of Scandinavia and across into Arctic Russia and down through the Baltic, and all of those birds are going to stream south, and a lot of them are going to find the Humber right where the sea narrows, and it's right here. The other thing is that we're also on the crossroads, because the birds that come across from Western Europe come through the Baltic and along the Dutch coast, and they do the jump across to the Humber and they feed here, and a lot of them molt here. So the Humber really is a crossroads. And the reason why those birds like to come here particularly, we've got something like 150 kilometres of every kind of mud you can imagine, starting from very, very sandy out in the edge, right the way up. Some of it is sticky and some of it is slimy and some of it is just right. You know, there's a Goldilocks for every species of bird.
And what are these birds eating when they're here?
You can get a clue on that if you look at their beaks. The ones with very short beaks are often those that are picking off the surface, and particularly if you see them either sanderling or ring plover, two little tiny birds with very short beaks who love the sandy sea coast, and they're found right on the edge, Cleethorpes and across at Spurn, and they're picking up little things like carophium, little tiny shrimp-like things that live in the surf, and they're running around pick with their little bills. Then as you come up through the sizes, as the beaks get longer, they're going deeper. You get some that can go down and even take the small cardiums, and of course you also get those with very long beaks like the curlew that are going right down into the burrows and can pull up a lugworm or go inland and pick up real earthworms. So really is something for every kind of bird here.
And in terms of the overall health of the bird population on the estuary, are the bird numbers increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they dealing with changes in the climate?
They are dealing with changes in the climate in their own way. And at the moment, our estuary numbers are very good, very high. And that is partly because they're losing all their birds on the west coast, because the birds don't need to go over there anymore. The east coast has always provided birds with better feeding. The mud here is excellent. It's just really, really full of things birds like to eat. But in past years, they risked getting, well, frozen to death, because the really cold east wind straight off the steppe,
Yes.
it's really biting. And anybody who has spent winters out there, it really is biting. And they used to therefore go across to the west coast where the feeding was less good, but the weather was more predictable, where the Gulf Stream kept it nice and mild. They don't need to do that now.
So we've been the
Our
beneficiary of their loss.
We have, yes. Yes, you go over there and they're saying, where have all our pintails gone? Where have all our dunlin gone? And we say, well, we know, we've got them.
So Anne, we're surrounded by lots of nice mud here, and I can see a little patch over there that's got plenty of bird prints on, so they've
Yeah.
found something there. So should we go and dig a
That-
little bit up and see if there's anything in it?
That's our best hope.
Okay,
The
let's see what
birds
we
know.
find. Oh, look at
Oh,
that.
yes.
Okay, so here we are, and we can see already that the mud's got lots of holes and burrows in it. Can you tell us what those might be?
Well, I think these are going to be what we call oligochaete worms. And there's some lovely burrows coming down here. They're not very long, and the actual worms have gone and left them. But there's more than I thought, and you can actually see they come to the surface. And I bet if we could find some of these peck marks, that explains why the burrows are empty. Because the birds that were up here at the last tide have actually
They cleaned it all out.
pulled them all out. Yes, but that's good and healthy actually for up here. I'm
Splendid,
surprised.
that's what we want to hear.
I'm here on the banks of the Humber to meet Graham Bonus, who nearly 10 years ago waded across the Humber for charity. Allegedly the first person to do this in 1,000 years. Starting at Wheaton on the north side, he battled across shifting mud and strong currents to get to the south side, ending at Wintringham. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you.
Why did you decide to do this walk?
I got involved with a charity called Deborah, which looks after children that suffer from epidermolysis bullosa, EB. So I really wanted to get involved in raising the money. The only way to raise a lot of money was to do something totally different. So I came up with the idea of walking across the River Humber.
And what kind of preparation did you have to do?
So this preparation is done on two sides. First of all, it's a preparation of sorting out the route, because you can't just go in the river and just willy-nilly walk across the river. So we got involved with ABP, and we also got involved with Humber Rescue. So ABP helped me to plot the route, which was the best route to take, but also the best time to do it, which is vitally important. We only had a 20-minute window that we could really go for it to get across there. Any earlier or later, then the tide will get you and it'll just carry you out anyway. So it was important to get the timing spot on. Also then the backup from Humber Rescue, so we needed a team of guys that were with me all the time, either in a boat or near the mud, just in case I got into a lot of trouble, maybe got over exhausted, and they could pull me out and help me. You know, people say to me, oh, it was you that walked across the Humber, right? You were a great guy. And it's like, well, no, not really. I had the idea, but it was the team behind me that made it look so easy and made it look so possible.
Yeah. I mean, at the deepest point, where did it come up to on you?
Up to here, yeah. It was tight.
That
it was really
it's
tight,
really
yeah.
scary.
And the interesting thing is that now it'll never be done again, even if I wanted to do it again.
Yeah.
Because since we had the bad floods, it scoured the bottom of the river, so it's even deeper now. So even I couldn't do it 6 foot down.
So I understand that it's been about 1,000 years since anyone crossed this river on foot.
I have a bit of a problem with people saying that the Romans forded it. The reason for that is what's really interesting is the strength of the current. It's really strong. I think that if they did ford it, it wouldn't have been there for long. But then again, we flew over it to try and get the route planned, and indeed there's a straight road that goes straight to the bank of the river, just at the opposite side on the south side, where you'd say, well, that's a Roman road and it just stops at the river.
Yeah.
Did it stop at the river? Did they carry on over the river? I think they've probably got a boat over the river. It would make more sense, wouldn't it?
Where did you actually start and finish this walk?
We first started at Humber Rescue on that day, who then flew me by helicopter up to a place called Wheaton Lock. It's a very small place further up the river. And from there, we tracked across the river onto an island, and then we moved down the island further along across the last bit of river, which left us at Wintringham. So I came back at Wintringham. So it was took about 2 hours to do on the day.
Yeah, did you have to be in the right mindset?
When you're trying to crawl across thick mud and you're on your own, it becomes a very difficult time. Not difficult, but you're working a lot and your mind's going, and what am I going to do? I can't fail, the river's coming in. All the time, I just thought about the kids in my mind. You know, I just thought about these children that are suffering. I thought, well, you know, I've got like an hour or 2 hours of pain to go through. These have got it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, it was them that kept me going. So the only reason I got across really mentally was thinking about those children.
Have you got any more challenges?
No, I've run out of rivers. There isn't any left. If someone can come up with a good idea, one that is possible, I'll have a go. Unfortunately, I can't do this one now, but, you know, maybe one day.
Well, I wish you luck with everything else that you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In part 2, we'll be taking a trip in a survey hovercraft to collect some mud samples, which we'll be taking to the Institute of Estuarine and Coastal Studies at Hull University to see just what's in them. Join us.
Our Estuary, sponsored by the Humber Nature Partnership and BP Chemicals. Our Estuary, sponsored by the Humber Nature Partnership and BP Chemicals.
The waters of the Humber create a dynamic landscape which is always changing in both appearance and mood. Low tide exposes extensive mudflats, which on gloomy days like today can appear somewhat bleak and drab. But on brighter days, the sun catches the water and transforms the scene. Anyone visiting the Humber for the first time probably comments on its murky waters. Well, there's a good reason for that, and it's not pollution. In fact, it's cleaner than it's been in quite a few years. No, it's the mud. I'm going to meet Harbour Master Captain Phil Cowing here at Immingham, who's going to tell me about the need for dredging and why it's a constant necessity to allow ships to travel the river safely. And we'll be joining the survey boat on the River Humber. Hi Phil, can you explain what this vessel is used for?
Yeah, well, we're on board the Humber Charter Sara today, one of our 3 dedicated survey craft. We're going to be running a survey in Immingham Bellmouth, the dock entrance, and specifically we're going to have a look at the depths of water available in the entrance to the dock. And to do that, our team of hydrographic team of 2, Peter and Liam, will be using modern echo sounder equipment to run lines in and out of the entrance to find out what the available depths of water are here.
Right. So why is dredging necessary then?
Well, what we'll see from the survey today is whether the depths of water are being maintained. Periodically, because the Humber is such a dynamic environment with a soft, muddy bottom, entrances like this will want to silt up. So the purpose of the survey is it's a routine monthly survey to check what's happened with siltation. If the survey reveals to us that the depths are now starting to decrease, that will be our trigger to bring one of our dredging fleet in to actually remove that silt, take it across to the deposits locally and maintain the depth.
The river is brown because of those millions of tonnes that are in suspension. Inevitably, a lot of that material wants to deposit out around the docks and entrances and berth pockets. So Peter and Liam now are actually testing the speed of sound through water with a piece of equipment we call the Digibar. So before we commence any survey, hydrographic survey, it's necessary to know with some accuracy how fast the sound signal will travel through the water. Having calibrated the machine, we're pinging a beam of sound down onto the riverbed, and that returns, and we measure the speed at which it returns to accurately gauge the depth of water at this moment. We know the height of tide in the river, and we basically we reduce the sounding we get to what we call chart datum, and that gives us the actual depth of water against our target depth. We've got Sarah at the helm under Pete's guidance, doing a good job for us. This is the East Jetty with ships alongside, and we move across the Immingham dock entrance, what we call the bell mouth because of its natural shape, and we're heading across towards the West Jetty at Immingham.
Oh, now we're going a bit too starboard, aren't we?
I'll just get us back on the line, and then we'll come back to port. It's just getting your eye in, really, you know, and knowing when to counter the helm and steady up.
So where do you see the future of the Humber in terms of commerce and industry?
Well, the Humber is and has been vitally important to the UK PLC. 16% of all UK seaborne trade comes through the Humber ports. That equates to about 95 million tonnes per annum. And you know, if we get it right as a harbour, we'll grow that figure. You know, we'll expand to meet the demand of the UK PLC. And you know, any port and harbour has to adapt to the modern trades and the changes in trade.
Will this affect the wildlife then?
Well, again, one of my principal roles, you know, in maintaining the harbour fit for all who use it is good stewardship of the harbour as well. So you know, the whole of the Humber is a European marine site with every designation that applies to that. So it's an SPA site for birds, Ramsar site for wetlands. So you know, with all that in mind, everything we do in developing the Humber ports has to be ecologically sound. There's a raft of regulation now in the UK, principally the habitats regs. So anything we do in terms of port development must be in accordance with the requirements of the regs, and we work closely with Natural England, the Environment Agency, the Marine Management Office, in making sure that if we develop an area, then and there's an adverse impact from that we compensate that, you know, in other areas of the Humber, so that basically industry and nature can grow together, and we maintain that balance, you know, which is vital.
Today I'm at Cleethorpes with Mike Bailey from the Institute of Estuary and Coastal Studies. As we've seen before, the Humber's a very muddy estuary, but the mud's very important because of the wildlife it supports. And today we're going to be taking some samples of mud to take them back to the lab to see what's in them. So what can we expect to find, Mike?
Well, this is just a condition assessment, just to see what's actually living there. So it will vary because this is going to go all the way up to Gould. So the species composition will change quite drastically from Gould down to here.
Well, it looks like the weather's going to hold up for us today. So I'll drive the hovercraft and we'll go and get some cores. we're now at the Midshore Point, and the tide is coming in, so we're trying to work quite quickly here. So this is a vacuum corer, which creates a vacuum to lift the core out, and then we release it and put it into the sample bag. Perfect. So these samples will be sieved. Any beasties living in the samples will be separated out. They'll then be identified and counted, and then we'll be able to compare this with previous results from this site to see if anything's changed. Mike's having a little walk around there. He's looking at surface features, so he's looking at the sediment, in this case fairly sandy, so we're looking at ripples. This tells us about how water's been moving, how the sediment's been laid down. He's also looking for evidence of bird feeding, which we've already seen some of, and then he'll be looking for debris from animals, bits of shells, burrows, because you can tell a lot from burrows about the type of invertebrates that are living here. You can see the beak marks from a bird which has been foraging, looking for cockles by the look of it. And there's a smallish cockle. So they definitely know there's food here. Okay, well, the tide's coming in now. We're always short of time on these surveys because we're working around the tide, so we need to get up the beach and get to our next sample site. Well, this is a more interesting site. Compared to the sandy stuff we've been in, which is not going to be particularly rich in things for birds to eat, we've now got a nice muddy site. This is the rarer type of Humber mud. That is, it's the firmer, sandier stuff. But much like the gloopy, soft stuff, this is often very rich, and there's plenty of things for birds to eat. So what have we got here then, Mike?
So we've got juvenile cockle. We've got plenty of Macoma, which they're both bivalves, these shells here. We've got lots of snails, lots of the hydroba that we're seeing on the surface, these small black things. All these tubes are all made by worms. Some of them will have worms in, and they're all spionid tubes. Somewhere we've got another snail.
Yeah. Oh, I can see another worm there.
Yeah. That is a very young araniculate, or lugworm. Very small. We've also got an insect larvae. Decided to make his home here.
A bit out of place, but there we go.
Yeah. I think that's about your lot.
Well, not bad for a quick look-see.
No. Hopefully we'll get all that stuff in the core and we can identify them properly under a microscope.
Splendid. There we are, Mike. A good haul of samples for the lab. I'll give you a hand with these. And we'll see you all later.
If you'd like to find out more about any of the items on today's show, please go to www.estuary.tv/Our Estuary.
Our Estuary, sponsored by the Humber Nature Partnership and BP Chemicals.